Warning. This process report contains a Class CI memetic hazard. Receipt confirmation of this process report is required. Acknowledgement. Confirmed. Access granted. Graham Corporation. Project. Clearance priority. Bostrom Kurzweil. Process report 052618. Third Eye Department's Divisions 1 through 2 are tasked with creation and dissemination of this process report's Class I and IC hazards under supervision from current USV Director, Scholar, and the approval of Mitra S. Attached for review.
Hey everyone, I'm Robert Reed. I've been working on Lain Protocol for the last 4 or 5 months, and something occurred to me after I did the first 2 videos, thanks to feedback by excellent people out there, which is that, how do I find Lain Protocol and how do I play it? And I was like, oh, this probably should have been the first things I answered, but I didn't. So, let's go ahead and do this nifty screen transition. And this is Tabletop Simulator. This right now is where you can play Lain Protocol for free. If you've never heard of it, it's on Steam, and if you've never heard of that, you need to go get it. Tabletop Simulator is a great place where you can play not only Lain Protocol, but you can play Uno, chess, checkers, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering, Codenames, Secret Hitler. There's a guy who's been posting for Descent 2nd Edition over and over in there. It's a great thing because, among other things, you can play Lain Protocol. Yes. Now we're going to answer the second question, which is, how do you play this game? What kind of game is it? Okay, so the basics of what type of game it is have already gone over. It's a 1 to 4 player cooperative game, about 60 minutes in length, where you and whoever else is playing with you pilot 4 characters trying to get through a computer network, get to its center, steal what's there, and then get out while you still can, because everyone is now after you. But with that large overview, let's get into some specifics. So here is the entirety of the board. So first I'm going to introduce this main board to you. So the 4 players are going to be piloting these 4 target hack tokens, which represent your access into the network. Your goal is to fight various threats that the group will decide on which to engage. After you successfully engage a threat, you will gain more access into the network. As you gain more and more access, more options for what you are going to fight appeal to you, but additionally, the more threatening things you have to overcome. Once you have overcome all of these threats, or enough of them to get into the center, you experience whatever is in the center here, which is randomly decided, and then you learn how you're going to win the game and some ways that you're going to lose the game. So, with that out of the way, let's get into some very, very useful specifics. So, this over here is the combat board and your 4-player action boards. There will always be 4 characters playing, even if there's only 1 of you, or 3 of you, or 4 of you, or 2 of you playing. Or, if you have little ones, maybe you and another person and someone who is half in and half out. So, with that, you have 6 characters to pick from. They're fairly generically named right now, and because there are 6 of them, there's an easy way to access which one you're going to get. You roll them to decide which one you will randomly get. So this person over here will get number 2. This person over here will get number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so on. You do this until all of the players have their own characters, and then you move on from there. So, let's detail what these characters have, shall we? Each character has 4 major points of interest. The first is connection, the second is log, the third is tracked, and the fourth is all of this goodness right here. So let's talk about connection. If you've played other games, then you can think of connection as your maximum life. This red button right here, this red counter, is how much life you start the game with. In this case, 4. This gray counter is how much damage you've taken, which in the game is called interference. So for example, in this game, if you take 2 interference or 2 damage, rather than lowering your life or your connection by 2 this way, you would instead count 1, 2, and place that you have 2 interference. This is important because in this game there's a lot of damage mitigation, healing, and things of that nature, and knowing what your maximum life is important because it can vary based on the actions and the exploits that you have. We'll get into what actions and exploits are soon, but first let's talk about log. So log doesn't really do a whole lot. By itself, it doesn't really mean anything if you have 3 or 4. Some complications and some threats will get a little more powerful based on log or make you more powerful, but none of that really matters as much as what happens when you hit 10. When you hit 10 log, you become tracked. Now let's say you're at 10 log and you go, oh no, somehow you lose a log token. You don't lose tracked. Even if you lose all of your log tokens, which I've never seen before, but could happen, you will still remain tracked. So let's talk about what tracked is and why it's important. So biggest thing about tracked is that if every player in the game is tracked, you all lose. That's right, all of you. You and you and you. And the fourth person, you all lose. Welcome to cooperative games. Next thing that tracked does is it makes enemy threats, the enemies that you'll be fighting throughout this computer network over yonder, it will make them more powerful in a way that will become apparent as soon as we get over there. But just keep in your mind now that tracked makes those guys more powerful. So it's not just, oh, well, if 3 of us are tracked and the 4th one isn't, we're fine. As more people are tracked, it becomes harder and harder to do your job of smashing into the network. So let's talk about these cards over here. These two, the green cards with the green @ symbol, are repeatable actions or player actions. So on each player's turn, and we'll get into that for combat, each player has 2 actions that they can take on their turn. Any action that you take takes 1 action point. So these green cards are repeatable. So let's say probe F, basic, or use this card, gain 1 interference and select another player. That player gains +1 payload on their next turn. We'll talk about payload in a second. But that would mean, okay, I use this effect, that's my 1 action, I gain 1 interference, and some other player, let's say this guy, lucky guy, gets +1 payload on their next turn. Okay, cool. Next thing we want to talk about are exploits. Exploits are usually far more powerful than player actions, but they have a consequence. So all player actions can be used repeatedly in a combat. So if you have, let's say, probe F, you can use it twice, no problems. Now let's take a look at some of these complications, or rather some of these exploits. Getting ahead of myself. So let's take a look at middleman. Ooh, this exploit passively increases your connection by 1. Okay, so you have 5 connections to start the game instead of 4. That's pretty cool. Basic, or flip this card. Select a non-intercepting player. We'll get into what that means in a little while. That player loses 2 interference and becomes the new intercepting player. To use these exploits, you have to flip them, and once they're flipped, they cannot be used again until the end of the combat. Now, at the start of each new combat, all of these become unflipped again, and you can use them, but the best way, barring exceptions, to think of these is you can use these actions as many times in a combat as you want. You can only use these exploits once per. Now, let's say you had 2 middlemans. You can use this one, and the next turn use this one. That's fine. What you cannot do is use this one and then use it again. It's only a once per combat deal. So let's get out over here. We've talked about all of the things that each player has, and each player, while they will have different starting stats, will have the same trackers to work with, the same number of default player actions and exploits, and while they differ, they're similar enough. But what is noise? Well, noise is a tracker the players have to be cognizant of because it is another loss condition and it is a global thing. It is something all the players share. So as you fight against various threats, use your own exploits or your player actions, or you fight off against the complications that these threats will bring, you will gain noise. Noise doesn't matter too much. It doesn't seem to be too big of a deal. I mean, noise can rack up. And look, this tracker goes all the way to 15, but there's a problem when it hits 15. Noise is the second way you can lose the game. If all players are tracked at any point in the game, you lose. But if you have 15 noise before you bring a target hack token to the center of the network, the players lose again. And that's all of you, whether there's 1 of you or there's 4 of you. So that is the second way that you can lose the game. Now, let's go ahead and talk about moving through the network here. We'll get into combat a little bit later because it's a bit involved. It might even be its own separate video. But let's take a look. Let's say the group, first off, as a gameplay loop, will decide what enemy that is connected to a target hack token by line they want to fight next. So for example, if you were here, this target hack token can be used to fight this, or this, or this, because they are all connected eventually by various lines. And I have cats. Cats are awesome. So this can be used to attack any of these three threats. The players, as a group, will decide what they want to fight. Let's say they want to fight, I don't know, rename 6. We'll get into combat later, but say you successfully defeat it. When you do, a couple things happen. First thing is, you take one exploit from the exploit deck, and you move it to successful hex. Second thing that happens is you take this token and move it forward. The third thing that happens is that any connected threats that are connected by the lines on this node or this space on the network get flipped up. So now players have a new means of accessing the network. As you go further in the network, you fight more and more powerful threats with more and more complications. But what you can fight and your choices expand. So let's talk about exploits. Let's say, you know how we said we could get to 1? Let's say we get to 2 and then 3. Let's say you get to 4. When you get to 4 exploits, you flip over all of the exploits. Then each player will take 1 from among these 4. Now, you can't have one player take 4, can't have 2 players take 2 each, and the other 2 just get screwed out entirely. Each person will take 1, and the group as a whole will decide what they want to take for whom. Another thing that happens when you get to 4 successful hacks is that all players lose the interference that they have. No, that's pretty good. As I said again, your goal is to get to the center. When you get to the center, this flipped card here will reveal new win and loss mechanics for you. Up until now, we've talked about how you could lose the game, but not how you could win the game. But I'll let you play this to find out exactly what's going on. A couple things that are worth mentioning. So there are cards in the game that will talk about lockdown tokens. This is a lockdown token. When a lockdown token is placed on a node or on a space on the network, you cannot, for any reason, move onto or through that space. So let's say that we have this scenario. Okay? This target hack token here cannot fight this enemy because there is a threat stopping it from going around that way, and there's a lockdown token that it cannot pass going this way. Keep in mind where you place your lockdown tokens, as it's very important for successfully completing the game, and it's something you should keep in mind. Another thing that you may run into are leak tokens. Some cards say that they will place leak tokens on the board. You can place a leak token anywhere that does not currently have a target hack or a lockdown token. So here's a good place, and here's a good place, and here's a good place, and here. Those are all good places. This is not a good place. This, whoops, is not a good place. Cool. Now I think I'll make that it for now. We're going to go ahead and get into combat in the next video, but I wanted to keep this short and keep the basics going. So, till next time.
Process report subsections 1 through 3 are classified to clearance priority. Disciplinary actions for Stable 2 and former USV Department Director John Doe are currently under examination by UIU2 of SPAN Department. Third Eye Department Director Piniel 3E's position rescinded under Mitra S pending independent review of relevant events. This process was outlined by UI and SPAN Department 5 years ago. There are no more warnings. DNE, Chief Architect.